The massive crystalline halls of the Galactic Council station hummed with nervous energy. Representatives from 47 different species had gathered for what many considered the most important meeting in galactic history. The discovery of a new species always brought excitement, but this time was different. This time, the new species had found them first. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vraxian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes, his forearms trembling slightly. As the current council speaker, the responsibility of first contact fell to him. Through the massive viewing ports, he could see the strange vessel hanging motionless in space. It was unlike anything in their databases, angular, metallic, and somehow intimidating despite being smaller than most council ships. "Speaker Zethkar," called out Ambassador Yilnara, her crystalline form shimmering with anxiety. "The vessel has been silent for 6 hours. Our translators are ready, but they refuse to communicate through normal diplomatic channels." Zethkar's primary eyes focused on the data pad floating before him. The species called themselves humans, from a planet called Earth in the outer rim of the galaxy. What troubled him most was how they had arrived. No jump signatures, no warp trails, no dimensional rifts. One moment space was empty, the next their ship was there, as if it had been waiting all along. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Drelmoth, "they're finally responding, but they're not using our diplomatic frequencies. They're broadcasting on what appears to be an ancient military channel." The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the human vessel. 3 figures stood before the camera, wearing matching dark clothing with various patches and insignia. The one in the center stepped forward, his face hard and weathered, with eyes that seemed to have seen too much. "This is Colonel Marcus Stone, United States Army Special Forces, representing Earth and the human species," the figure said in a voice that carried absolute authority. "We're here for the Galactic Council and we're coming aboard whether you like it or not." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. In 10,000 years of council history, no species had ever demanded entry to their halls. Diplomacy was always handled through careful protocols, formal invitations, and lengthy negotiations. Ambassador Telvanni of the Peaceful Collective rose from her seat, her gossamer wings fluttering with indignation. "The audacity! They cannot simply demand entry. There are protocols, procedures, laws that govern first contact." But Zethkar was studying the humans more carefully. Something in their posture, their bearing, reminded him of stories his grandfather had told about the ancient warrior races that had once threatened the galaxy before civilization had tamed them. These humans carried themselves like predators, like beings who had earned their confidence through violence rather than diplomacy. "What are your intentions?" Zethkar asked, his voice carrying across the communication link. "Why do you approach the council in this manner?" The human called Stone exchanged glances with his companions before answering. "Because we've been watching you for longer than you think, and we know what's coming. The Devourers are 3 months out from your core worlds, and your entire defense fleet couldn't stop a single scout ship." The chamber erupted in chaos. The Devourers were legend, a myth used to frighten children and explain ancient ruins found on dead worlds. Most council members had dismissed them as folklore created by primitive civilizations trying to explain natural disasters. "Impossible," declared Admiral Coxthane, his scaled hide rippling with disbelief. "Our long-range sensors show no such threat. The Devourer myth has been thoroughly debunked by our xenoarchaeologists." The second human, a woman with short blonde hair and scars across her visible skin, stepped forward. "Major Sarah Chin, Army Rangers. Your sensors can't detect them because they travel through folded space-time, not normal hyperspace. We know because we've been fighting them for 20 years. The third human remained silent, but his eyes constantly swept the chamber visible on screen, cataloging exits, threats, and tactical positions with the systematic precision of a professional soldier. Zethkar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. Fighting them? You've encountered these beings before? Stone nodded grimly. First contact wasn't exactly friendly. They showed up in our solar system in 2157, started consuming our outer planets, turned Jupiter into some kind of feeding station. We've been at war ever since. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. This species, these humans, had been engaged in warfare with a threat the Council didn't even believe existed. More troubling was the fact that they were still alive to talk about it. How? The question came from Ambassador Quintel, his insectoid form clicking with nervous energy. Our projections suggest that a species at your apparent technological level would be consumed within days of first contact with devourers. Major Chen's expression hardened. Because we don't fight like you. We don't send fleets to meet them in open space. We don't try to negotiate or understand them. We hunt them like the parasites they are. The silent third human finally spoke, his voice carrying a distinct accent. Captain Diego Morales, Marine Force Recon. We learned real quick that these things don't respond to anything except overwhelming violence. So we got real good at violence. Through the viewing ports, more human vessels began materializing around the Council station. Not appearing from jump space, not decloaking, simply becoming visible as if they had been there all along. The implications of such stealth technology sent ripples of fear through the assembled diplomats. How many ships do you have? Admiral Coxthane demanded, his military instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. Enough, Stone replied simply. We're not here to threaten you. We're here to save you. The Devourers have been systematically working their way through this galaxy for the past century. They hit the isolated systems first, the ones too far out for the Council to notice. They've consumed 47 star systems in this sector alone. The number matched exactly with the systems that had gone silent over the past 100 years. Systems the Council had written off as technological failures or natural disasters. The pattern was suddenly, horrifyingly clear. Ambassador Yilnara's crystalline form was pulsing with distress patterns. If what you say is true, why haven't you contacted us before? Why appear now? Because you weren't ready, Colonel Stone said bluntly. Your entire civilization is built on cooperation, negotiation, peaceful resolution of conflicts. You've bred the warrior instinct out of most of your species. The Devourers are a warrior species. They only understand strength, and they've never encountered a prey species that fights back effectively. Captain Morales gestured to something off-screen, and technical readouts began appearing on the Council's displays. Star charts showing Devourer movement patterns, technological specifications for weapons the Council had never imagined, tactical analyses of battles fought in the void between stars. We've been preparing for this moment for 2 decades, Major Chen explained. Building fleets, training soldiers, developing weapons specifically designed to kill Devourers. We know their weaknesses, their patterns, their psychology. But we can't protect the entire galaxy alone. Zethkar studied the data streaming across his screens. The human weapons were primitive by Council standards, but they were also brutal, efficient, and designed with one purpose: maximum destruction of organic matter. Where Council technology focused on precision and minimal collateral damage, human weapons seemed designed to obliterate everything in their path. You want us to become warriors, he said, understanding finally dawning. You want us to abandon 10 millennia of civilization and become killers. Stone's expression didn't change. No. We want you to survive. The choice of how you do that is yours. But the Devourers will be here in 93 days. Your choice is simple. Learn to fight or learn to die. The chamber fell silent except for the ambient hum of life support systems. Through the viewing ports, the human fleet hung in space like sleeping predators, their angular forms so different from the graceful curves of Council vessels. Ambassador Telvanni was the first to break the silence. Assuming we believe your claims, What exactly are you proposing? Major Chen stepped forward. We train your people. We share our weapons technology. We coordinate our fleets. And when the Devourers arrive, we hit them with everything we have, all at once, before they can establish a foothold. And if we refuse? Admiral Coxthane asked. Captain Morales answered with brutal honesty. Then in 94 days, this station becomes a feeding ground, and the Galactic Council becomes an extinct political entity. We'll fall back to our prepared positions and continue the fight alone. The weight of the decision pressed down on every representative in the chamber. 10,000 years of peaceful civilization hung in the balance, threatened not just by the approaching Devourers, but by the choice to either embrace violence or face extinction. Zethkar looked around the chamber at the faces of his fellow council members. Fear, disbelief, anger, and desperate hope warred in their expressions. The humans had given them an impossible choice: abandon everything they stood for or lose everything they had built. But as he studied the tactical displays showing the approaching Devourer swarm, one thing became crystal clear. The humans had traveled across the galaxy not as conquerors, but as reluctant saviors. They had come to offer the one gift that might preserve the Council's civilization, the knowledge of how to wage war against an implacable enemy. The question now was whether the Galactic Council could learn to become something it had never been before. An alliance of warriors united against a common threat. The clock was ticking, and somewhere in the dark between the stars, an ancient hunger was drawing ever closer to the heart of Council space. The training grounds on Council Station 7 had been transformed beyond recognition. What was once a peaceful botanical garden where diplomats held quiet meetings now resembled something from humanity's most violent conflicts. Obstacle courses wound between demolished flower beds, firing ranges had been carved into meditation alcoves, and the gentle sounds of flowing water had been replaced by the harsh crack of weapons fire. Ambassador Zethkar ducked as a plasma bolt sizzled past his head, his forearms struggling to maintain grip on the human rifle Colonel Stone had forced into his hands. Sweat poured from his exoskeleton despite the controlled environment, and every instinct screamed at him to find cover and wait for the violence to end. "Stop thinking like prey!" Major Chen barked from behind a makeshift barrier. "Devourers can smell fear across a star system. You think like food. You become food." Around the training ground, representatives from dozens of species were learning the same brutal lessons. The crystalline Yilnara had shattered 3 appendages, learning to handle grenades. Admiral Coxthane's scales were scorched from plasma backwash, but his reptilian features showed grim determination as he mastered the art of close-quarters combat. The transformation hadn't been easy. For the first week, half the Council had demanded the humans leave. Traditional pacifist species like the Ethereal Collective had withdrawn entirely, choosing to trust in their advanced shields and automated defenses rather than soil themselves with weapons training. But then the reports started coming in. Long-range scouts, pushing deeper into unexplored space than ever before, began sending back data that confirmed humanity's darkest warnings. Dead systems, planets stripped to their cores, ancient ruins that matched devourer consumption patterns. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Captain Morales emerged from behind cover, moving with fluid precision as he neutralized training targets with methodical efficiency. "Time," he called out, and the simulation ended. "Better. Zethkar, you're still telegraphing your movements. Coxthane, good aggression, but watch your ammunition conservation." The past month had been the most intensive training program in galactic history. Human military instructors had spread throughout Council space, teaching everything from small unit tactics to fleet-scale strategy. The cultural shock was enormous. Species that had never raised weapons in anger were learning to think like soldiers. But it was working. Slowly, painfully, The Council's representatives were developing something they'd never possessed, a warrior mindset. "Sir," a young Vraxian technician approached Zethkar, his voice trembling with excitement. "The weapons production facilities on Kepler 442b are reporting full operational capacity. The human designs are incredible. Brutal, but incredibly effective." Zethkar nodded, reviewing the data on his pad. Human weapons technology was primitive compared to Council standards, but it was also specifically designed for one purpose: killing biological targets as efficiently as possible. Where Council weapons were elegant tools of precision, human weapons were instruments of devastating destruction. The electromagnetic pulse rifles could disrupt nervous systems across multiple species. The plasma cannons generated heat intense enough to boil water inside organic tissue. The kinetic penetrators could punch through any known biological armor. Every human weapon seemed designed by beings who had studied death as carefully as the Council had studied life. Colonel Stone approached their group, his battle-scarred face showing approval. "Your people learn fast, faster than we expected. Most of our projections assumed it would take years to develop effective combat instincts." "Fear is a powerful teacher," Zethkar replied grimly. "The long-range scans are confirming your timeline. The Devourers will reach our outer territories in 47 days. Stone nodded. "Then it's time for the next phase. Come with me." He led them through the station's corridors to a heavily secured section that hadn't existed before the humans arrived. The walls here were lined with a strange metallic compound that seemed to absorb light, and the air itself felt different, charged with potential energy. "Welcome to the War Room," Major Chen announced as massive doors slid open. The chamber beyond was a three-dimensional map of the galaxy, with Council territories highlighted in blue and projected Devourer positions marked in ominous red. But it was the third color that drew their attention: green markers scattered throughout space, representing human assets they'd never suspected existed. "Holy ancestors," Admiral Coxthane breathed, his scales rippling with shock. "You have installations in over 200 systems. How is this possible?" Captain Morales smiled grimly. 20 years of preparation. We knew this day would come, so we built for it. Hidden bases, weapon stockpiles, automated defense platforms. We've been seeding the galaxy with everything we'd need for the final battle." The scope of human preparation was staggering. They hadn't just been fighting the Devourers. They'd been playing a galactic chess game, positioning assets and resources for a conflict most species didn't even believe was coming. "The key to beating Devourers," Colonel Stone explained, highlighting tactical positions throughout the map, "is understanding how they hunt. They're not just predators, they're farmers. They cultivate fear, let it spread through populations, then harvest the resulting chaos. Panic makes their feeding easier." Ambassador Yilnara's crystalline form pulsed with patterns indicating deep thought. "You're saying they use psychological warfare as much as physical force?" "More," Major Chen confirmed. "A terrified population makes mistakes, runs into ambushes, abandons defensive positions. Devourers have perfected the art of making their prey defeat themselves." The holographic display shifted, showing recorded battles between human forces and Devourer swarms. The footage was horrifying. Massive organic ships that seemed to grow rather than be built, disgorging waves of creatures that defied easy description. But what caught everyone's attention was how the humans fought back. No retreat, no panic, no negotiation, just methodical, brutal destruction. "This is what sets humans apart," Stone continued. "We don't just fight to survive, we fight to win, completely, utterly. When we commit to warfare, we commit to victory, regardless of cost." The recordings showed human ships ramming Devourer vessels rather than allowing them to escape. Soldiers fighting to the last round, then continuing with improvised weapons. Entire crews choosing to detonate their ship's reactors rather than allow the enemy to board. "Your species is insane," Admiral Coxthane said, but there was admiration in his voice rather than condemnation. "Probably," Captain Morales agreed, "but insanity is exactly what you need to fight an enemy like this. They count on rational beings making rational choices, running when flight is logical, surrendering when resistance seems futile. Humans don't do rational when we're angry enough." The next several hours were spent in detailed tactical planning. Human strategic knowledge combined with Council resources was producing war plans that neither species could have developed alone. The Council brought superior technology, vast manufacturing capacity, and detailed knowledge of galactic geography. Humans brought experience, tactical innovation, and an understanding of how to fight an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with. But as the planning session continued, uncomfortable truths began to emerge. The numbers weren't encouraging. Even with everything they were bringing to bear, the Devourer swarm was massive, larger than any threat the galaxy had faced in recorded history. "Worst-case scenarios?" Zethkar asked during a brief break. Stone's expression darkened. "We lose 60% of Council territory before we can establish an effective defense line. Maybe 70% if they've learned new tricks since our last major engagement. Best case, we hold them at the outer rim and push them back system by system over the next decade. And if we lose, then this becomes the last generation of galactic civilization. The Devourers don't leave survivors who might evolve new defenses. When they're done feeding, they sterilize everything behind them." The weight of responsibility was crushing. Every decision they made in the coming weeks would determine whether thousands of species lived or died, whether 10 millennia of galactic civilization survived or became nothing more than organic fuel for an ancient hunger. But there was also something else growing in the room, something the Council had never experienced before. Unity forged not through discussion and compromise, but through shared purpose and common threat. For the first time in their history, every species in the Council was working toward the same goal with the same desperate intensity. "There's something else," Major Chen said quietly. "Something we haven't told you yet, about why we're really here." The room fell silent, waiting. "Earth is gone," she continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was saying. "Not destroyed, but consumed. The Devourers took our homeworld 6 months ago. We evacuated what we could, but most of humanity died defending the planet. The implications hit like a physical blow. These humans weren't fighting to save their own world. They were fighting to prevent other species from suffering the same fate they had already endured." "You're refugees," Zethkar said, understanding finally dawning. "We're the last of humanity," Colonel Stone confirmed. "About 3 million people scattered across 40 ships. We came here because this is our last chance to strike back. If we can't stop them here, at the heart of galactic civilization, then nowhere is safe." Captain Morales stepped forward. "That's why we're going to win. Because we have to. Because if we don't, then everything we've lost means nothing." The transformation in the room was immediate and profound. What had begun as military cooperation between species became something deeper, a shared understanding that they were fighting not just for territory or resources, but for the very concept of civilization itself. Over the next week, the pace of preparation intensified beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Entire worlds converted to weapons production. Civilian populations trained in basic combat techniques. Ancient treaties were rewritten to allow for military cooperation on an unprecedented scale. The humans had done more than teach the Council to fight. They had shown them what it meant to have something worth fighting for. And as the Devourer swarm drew closer to Council space, both species prepared for a battle that would determine the fate of every living thing in the galaxy. The first Devourer scouts arrived exactly when Colonel Stone had predicted. Long-range sensors detected the dimensional rifts 37 days after the humans' arrival at Council space, massive tears in reality through which organic nightmares began to pour. Admiral Coxthane stood on the bridge of the Council's flagship, watching the tactical displays with newly trained military eyes. The past month had transformed him from a ceremonial naval officer into something he'd never imagined becoming. A warrior prepared to die for his beliefs. "Enemy formations emerging from fold space," reported Lieutenant Commander Veltar, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. "Initial count suggests 67 vessels, ranging from frigate to—" "By the ancestors, sir. That largest one is 40 kilometers long." Through the viewing port, space itself seemed to writhe as the Devourer ships materialized. They weren't built so much as grown, organic curves and ridges that pulsed with their own internal light, biomechanical hybrids that blurred the line between ship and creature, weapon and organism. But the most unsettling aspect was how they moved. Unlike the precise trajectories of technological vessels, these ships undulated through space like massive predators swimming through an invisible ocean. "Contact from Human Fleet Command," the communications officer announced. "Colonel Stone is requesting immediate tactical conference." Stone's image appeared on the main screen, and Coxthane was struck by how much the human had changed over the past month. The hard edges had become sharper, the eyes more focused. This wasn't just a soldier anymore. This was a man preparing for what might be his final battle. "Admiral, are your forces in position?" "All Council fleets report ready," Coxthane confirmed. 237 vessels armed with human-designed weapons and crewed by species who 3 months ago didn't know how to fire a plasma rifle. "Good enough. Remember, we don't try to match them ship for ship. We use mobility, surprise, and concentrated fire. Make them think, make them react, keep them off balance until we can spring the main trap." The battle plan they'd developed was unlike anything in Council military history. Instead of the traditional formation engagements favored by civilized warfare, they would fight like guerrillas on a galactic scale. Hit-and-run attacks, ambush tactics, and psychological warfare designed to exploit the one weakness humans had identified in Devourer psychology. They expected their prey to behave like prey. "Devourer advance elements are moving toward the Kepler system," Major Chen's voice crackled through the comm. "Right on schedule. All human stealth platforms are in position." Through the tactical display, Coxthane could see the hidden assets Colonel Stone had revealed. Automated weapon platforms disguised as asteroids, missile swarms waiting in the shadow of moons, entire fleets of small, fast ships that had been invisible to sensors until the humans activated their transponders. The scope of preparation was staggering. While the Council had been debating and training, the humans had been seeding every potential battlefield with nasty surprises. "Enemy vessels are entering the Kepler system," reported the sensor operator. They're beginning to feed." The images transmitted from the system were horrifying. Devourer ships attached themselves to planetary surfaces like massive parasites, extending organic drilling apparatus deep into the crust. Within hours, entire continents began to wither and die as some kind of biological extraction process drained the life from everything it touched. But the humans had anticipated this. They'd studied Devourer feeding patterns for 20 years, and they knew the creatures were most vulnerable when gorging themselves on planetary resources. "Execute Phase 1, Stone commanded. Space around the Kepler system suddenly erupted with weapons fire. What the Devourers had assumed was empty space revealed itself to be filled with hidden weapon platforms. Kinetic projectiles launched from concealed positions. Plasma bursts emerged from behind asteroids. Missile swarms that had been drifting like space debris suddenly activated their engines. The surprise was total. 3 Devourer vessels died in the first 30 seconds, their organic hulls ruptured by weapons designed specifically to target biological tissue. The remaining enemy ships writhed in apparent pain, their feeding apparatus retracting as they tried to understand what was happening. "All Council forces, this is Admiral Coxthane," he broadcast across the combined fleet. "Execute Assault Pattern Omega. Remember your training. Fight like humans." It was a strange battle cry for species that had never wanted to be warriors, but it worked. Council ships poured out of hyperspace in perfectly coordinated formations, their crews applying months of human tactical training with desperate intensity. The Vraxian Third Fleet came in high, raking Devourer formations with concentrated plasma fire. The crystalline defense force materialized from behind the system's primary star, their ship's energy shields redirecting solar radiation into focused beam weapons. Even the traditionally peaceful Ethereal Collective had joined the battle, their advanced technology adapted into weapons that could disrupt biological nervous systems. But it was the human contribution that truly turned the tide. Captain Morales led a squadron of small, fast ships through impossible maneuvers, diving between Devourer vessels and deploying biological weapons specifically designed to target their organic components. The enemy ships began to show signs of actual distress, their movements becoming erratic as human biotoxins spread through their living systems. "Enemy reinforcements incoming," warned the tactical officer, massive dimensional rifts opening throughout the sector. This was what they'd been preparing for. The initial engagement was just the bait. The real Devourer fleet was about to arrive, and it would be unlike anything the galaxy had ever faced. The rifts tore open like wounds in space itself, and what emerged defied easy description. Hundreds of organic ships, some larger than space stations, began pouring into Council territory. But more than their size or numbers, it was their obvious intelligence that chilled everyone who saw them. These weren't just predators. They were strategists. The new arrivals immediately began coordinating with the survivors from the first wave, establishing complex formation patterns that suggested sophisticated tactical thinking. "Colonel Stone," Admiral Coxthane called out, "they're adapting faster than our projections suggested. Recommend we advance to Phase 2 immediately." Stone's image nodded grimly. "Agreed. All human vessels, implement Tactical Doctrine 77 Alpha. Council forces, prepare for close engagement protocols." What followed was the largest space battle in galactic history. Hundreds of ships on both sides, fighting across multiple star systems simultaneously. The Council forces fought with desperate courage, applying human tactics with the innovative adaptation that had made their species masters of technology and diplomacy. But the Devourers were learning too. Each engagement taught them something new about their prey's capabilities. Their organic ships began developing resistances to human bioweapons. Their tactics evolved to counter Council strategies. Worst of all, they began demonstrating an understanding of psychological warfare that rivaled humanity's own expertise. "Sir," reported Major Chen from her command ship, "we're taking heavy losses. The enemy is adapting to our weapons faster than anticipated." Zethkar, who had insisted on serving aboard the flagship despite his diplomatic rank, watched the tactical displays with growing dread. They were winning individual battles, but the enemy kept coming. For every Devourer ship they destroyed, 2 more emerged from fold space. "Colonel Stone," he said quietly, "how many more do they have?" The human's expression was grim. "According to our intelligence, this is roughly 10% of their total force. They're testing us, learning our capabilities before committing their main fleet." The implications were staggering. If this massive armada was just a scouting force, then the true Devourer invasion would be unstoppable by conventional means. But Stone's expression suddenly changed, taking on the hard smile that his soldiers had learned to recognize. "Which is exactly what we want them to think. Admiral, prepare all forces for emergency jump. We're implementing the Alamo Protocol." Coxthane felt his scales ripple with recognition. The Alamo Protocol was the most desperate gambit in their battle plans. It required abandoning most of Council's space and falling back to a prepared position where they could make their final stand. "All vessels," he broadcast, "execute emergency jump to Rally Point Alpha. Human Command is implementing Alamo Protocol." Across the battle space, Council and human ships began vanishing into hyperspace, leaving the Devourers in apparent victory. From their perspective, they had successfully driven off the Defenders and could continue their feeding operations unopposed. They had no idea they were being led into the largest military trap in galactic history. Rally Point Alpha was a system the humans had been secretly fortifying for 15 years. 3 planets converted into massive weapons platforms. Asteroid belts seeded with automated defense systems. A primary star modified to serve as the galaxy's largest fusion weapon. More importantly, it was where the survivors of Earth had made their home. 3 million humans living on fortified habitats, working in weapons factories, training for the day when they could strike back against the creatures that had destroyed their world. "Welcome to New Terra," Colonel Stone said as the combined fleets emerged from hyperspace. "This is where we make our stand." The system was a marvel of military engineering. Every planet, moon, and asteroid had been converted into a defensive position. Weapons emplacements that could shatter continents. Shield generators powerful enough to deflect stellar radiation. And everywhere, signs of human determination, memorials to the fallen, battle flags from Earth's military units, and the faces of people who had lost everything but refused to surrender. "Estimated time until Devourer arrival?" asked Admiral Coxthane. 6 hours, Major Chen replied. "Long-range sensors indicate they're bringing everything. The entire swarm, over 3,000 vessels." Zethkar looked around the command center, seeing species that had never wanted to be soldiers preparing for what might be their final battle. Crystalline beings checking plasma charges. Ethereal entities coordinating with AI systems. Scaled reptilians and chitinous insects working alongside feathered avians and energy-based consciousness forms. The Galactic Council had become something it was never intended to be. An alliance of warriors united against extinction. "All stations report ready," came the announcement from Human Command. "Weapon systems at maximum charge. Defense platforms active. Stellar modification sequence armed and ready." Captain Morales approached their group, his face bearing the same grim determination they'd all learned to wear. "Whatever happens in the next few hours, remember one thing. We're not just fighting for our own survival. We're fighting to prove that civilized beings can become warriors when civilization itself is threatened." Through the viewing ports, space began to twist as massive dimensional rifts tore open. The Devourer swarm was arriving, and it was larger than anyone had imagined possible. The final battle for galactic civilization was about to begin.